I want to share some examples of how to use the camera roll tool. The camera roll tool is simply a way of adding something from your iPad into SeeSaw. So something that has already been created, a photo or an image that you've saved to your camera roll, you can then add to SeeSaw, add to your portfolio, and then use those wonderful tools, the drawing tool, the labeling tool, and the recording tool to interact with that image. So I want to share a few examples from my classroom. In this first screen, we have images that students have created or found, and they have uploaded to their SeeSaw portfolios and annotated them. The two on the left represent data screenshots. We use probeware that connects to our iPads to collect data. And rather than just having that data disappear, I have the students create a screenshot of the data. Then that's saved into their camera roll. Once they've done a screenshot and it's in their camera roll, they then go to their SeeSaw portfolio, which I call their digital lab notebook. They add the image from their portfolio and then they annotate it accordingly. So what you'll notice in this upper left corner is a heating curve that we collected in lab. The student then used SeeSaw to label the melting point and boiling point, as well as the different phase transitions. In the lower left, this was an experiment in periodic trends where we're looking at comparison of a reaction involving calcium and a reaction involving magnesium. Their lab report was actually screenshotting the data, uploading it to SeeSaw, and then annotating and explaining it. They had to first identify which curve was the calcium data and which curve was the magnesium data, and then record an explanation of why, how atomic structure explains the trend in reactivity. And by listening to this, I got a real sense of what students understood, what their misconceptions were, and to be honest, it's kind of fun to listen to them explain something as opposed to just grading paper reports all the time.
In this graph, calcium has a higher temperature because it reacts more vigorously than magnesium. The reason behind this is that you can see in the bottom I for the calcium atom and the magnesium atom. You can see that calcium has more energy levels, making the valence electrons, which are the outside electrons, on the last energy level farther away from the nucleus, making these electrons having a less stronger pull to the nucleus than in the magnesium atom. So, since the calcium valence electrons are farther away from the nucleus and have less of an attraction to the nucleus, they more easily react with other elements, making it more reactive.
Another example is in my anatomy class, we were talking about the skeletal system and fractures, different types of fractures and how they heal. The students had to do their medical rounds. So they had to find an x-ray and then take the role of being a doctor talking to their patient about what they see in that patient's x-ray. So this is an example of an image that the students had in their camera roll. They uploaded it to SeeSaw and then created their medical rounds.
Hi, my name's Dr. Litton.
And I'm Dr. Staley.
We heard you fell off your bike, and I'm sad to tell you, you have a green stick fracture in your radius.
But it always could be worse. A green stick fracture means that the break didn't go all the way through the bone.
You probably have a green stick fracture because you're only 6 years old and your bones are still more flexible than adult bones.
So again, in this case, the student is demonstrating their understanding of a type of fracture, how it heals, and the bones involved. Another example is if you could do a bit of an app smashing. I had the students find examples of the 4 major types of tissues. They had to organize it onto one slide. So you notice they used, I believe they used Google Slides for this one. They took a screenshot of what they did in Google Slides and then recorded an explanation of the 4 major types of tissues of each example. And so what you'll notice is within the muscle type, they have cardiac, smooth, and skeletal. They have nervous tissue. They have the major types of connective tissue. They've got bone and adipose and tendon and blood cells, as well as some examples of epithelial tissue that then they recorded an explanation comparing and contrasting. So these are some examples of things that students have uploaded from their camera roll. I use camera roll a lot to create things for students to then annotate and describe. So these are 2 examples of things that I had and created on my camera roll, And then when a teacher adds something to SeeSaw, you're given the option of either uploading it as you, which means nobody else can edit it, or you can upload it and share it with all students or some students, which gives them editing capability. So this one that you'll notice in the upper left-hand corner, I created just in Microsoft Word. I typed up this title, Physiology of the Eye and Ear. I then found an unlabeled diagram of the eye and an unlabeled diagram of the ear. None of this writing is mine. I did a screenshot. I did Shift Command 4 and chose just the section of the image I wanted, and then that saved it to my camera roll. I then uploaded it to SeeSaw, shared it with all my students, and I gave the assignment to them. This was actually a warm-up before they took a quiz. I said, please use the image, choose Edit Image, and use the Draw tools and the Record tools to explain to me how the eye works and how the ear works, including the major structures and their functions. So let's look at an example of some student work.
So we're going to be talking about the physiology of the eye and the ear. First is the eye. So what happens first is light enters through the cornea. The cornea then directs that light onto the lens, and the lens focuses the light onto the retina. The retina, which is in the back of the eye, then changes this light into electrical impulses, which are then sent up the optic nerve and to the occipital lobe of the brain, which...
So then you can see he's talking about the eye, and if we go a little bit further, you'll see he's starting to talk about the ear. And again, this was an image I created, so all students were working from the same image, but they were able to demonstrate their understanding through this explanation
temporal
and annotation.
Lobe, and the temporal lobe then interprets this as sound.
One more example is this one, where I uploaded this image that represents part of the cross-bridge cycle of muscle contraction, and I preloaded some labels. So what the students got without this play button was this image with these 6 labels already created. And I instructed the students to choose the Edit Item option and hit the Record button and move the labels around as they explained the different parts and their functions. So here's an example of some student work.
So the beginning process of the cross-bridge cycle starts off with the calcium ions coming in towards the actin proteins. So what happens is after these two are connected, the actin and the calcium ions, they change its position so that the myosin heads, which are in the red, they are connected then to the actin, because what happens is the actin and the myosin naturally want to be together so that the muscle can shorten or contract. So when they connect, an ATP comes in, allowing it for it to contract.
So I get a sense of the students' level of understanding and their appropriate ability to label the different parts of the diagram and explain how they work together. So I think the camera roll option is a really powerful tool to allow students to add images and explain them, and to allow the teacher to add images for students to then annotate and explain.